Good morning, Wabash. Speaking today at Pioneer Chapel is Wall Street Journal correspondent Ben Kesling, class of 2002, with his talk titled, "What Are You Waiting For?" Ben majored in religion at Wabash and is a Sigma Chi. He got his master's degree in divinity from the Harvard Divinity School, then served as an infantry officer in the United States Marine Corps. After returning from war, he attended the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern, and he was a two-time Jeopardy champion, started his family, and began his career as a correspondent with the Wall Street Journal. Ben is a Midwestern correspondent with the Wall Street Journal and the Chicago Bureau, where he also focuses on domestic security and veterans issues. He was previously a national security and veterans issues reporter at the Journal's Bureau in Washington. He also has experience as a foreign and combat correspondent. Please join me in welcoming Ben Kesling.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. And thanks for coming out to chapel instead of going back to your rooms and taking a nap. I appreciate that. So thanks for the great introduction, and thanks to Sphinx Club for hosting me today. So my chapel talk today is called, "What Are You Waiting For?" So I'm here on campus because I just wrote a new book about soldiers who go to war and then come back home. When they get back, sometimes they don't recognize the place because either it's changed or they've changed. Sometimes they don't recognize themselves, and sometimes it's both. Soldiers change because of life's events. What they see and do and hear and feel out there in the big world of combat zones and atrocities and the wonderment and love and the hate that comes with uniformed service. Home changes because of the unstoppable onslaught of time and because nothing ever stays the same way as it ever was. In fact, nothing ever really was the way it was, or at least the way they thought it was, before the scales fell from their eyes on their own road to Damascus, whatever that might have been. Well, I'm back home in a piece here at Wabash, and we've changed, both of us. Wabash and I, we're not the same. But we're in some ways the same in manifold ways in which neither I nor my alma mater knew would be the case 20 years ago, well before college days were past, as long as life shall last. Or maybe Warren Zevon said it better, "You know I'm tied to you like the buttons on your blouse." Wabash and I are inextricably connected. Anyhow, every time I come back here, it's sort of a homecoming to a home that changes, but that stays the same. And that's a good thing. I'm tied to Wabash, and Wabash is tied to me, just as all of you are. I recognize it more and more the further I go from Wabash and the longer it takes me to come back here. And it's a good reminder. We're bound to each other, grappled together as with hoops of steel, as Shakespeare said. A very good thing? Perhaps, but the reality of the matter, most definitely. I'm here doing this chapel talk today because the Sphinx Club thought that I might be able to impart some wisdom about what I learned during the writing of my book, the one I mentioned earlier, about a company of soldiers' deployment to Afghanistan and the reckoning with the aftermath of it. They thought I might be able to tie that back into my Wabash experience. Now, I'm not sure how much stock we should put in the judgment of a club full of guys who shave one leg and wear striped overalls to social occasions, but I digress. So, there's this thing that soldiers have, and it's called their moral compass. It's something that you might call their soul. That compass is calibrated during their youth by parents and teachers and mentors and those who influence them, and the places that cultivate them. Those soldiers carry it into combat, and once in combat, they find that they do things that don't align with the true north of that moral compass. Perhaps it's because they give in to a dark angel of their nature. Or perhaps they just recognize the inherent incompatibility of cosmic righteousness coexisting with human beings shooting each other. A robust moral compass is able to guide soldiers, even during dark times, ensuring that they know to do what's right, or at least recognize the wrongness of the situation in which they sometimes find themselves. Sometimes they don't know at the time that something is wrong, but when they come home, back to normal old life, the inextricable magnetic pull of those wrongs yank and tug at their moral compass, sometimes years down the road. They come home from combat and damage has been done to that compass. Perhaps they lose sight of a clear direction to travel. Or maybe they feel as if they can no longer know how to find their true north. In either case, a thoughtful soldier will know there has been a shock to the system, and an extraordinary test has been made of his or her very self, the stuff at the center of their being that makes them, them. Now, that calibration of that moral compass, it doesn't happen all of a sudden. It's something that takes place gradually and steadily throughout a young person's life. It takes place through the passive receipt of values and through the active acceptance or rejection of stimuli from all manner of places. And hey, it's not just soldiers who must rely on that moral compass, who find their souls tested in profound and life-altering ways. Everyone has such moments. In fact, they happen regularly, if not to such an incredible extent as what may be found in a combat zone. They happen when we see right and wrong play out before us on a daily basis. And we know how we should respond, but do we? And the way we respond, or don't, informs the way we respond in the future. It's a feedback loop, a virtuous cycle. Yes, that applies to heroism and the way a soldier reacts to atrocity in a combat zone, but it also applies itself to the more mundane, to the here, to the today. Do I go back and take a nap before my next class, or do I go to chapel and hear some dude give a talk? Compasses are tuned by micro-calibrations. My friends, I hate to say it, but dragging your ass over to chapel gives that ever so slight nudge towards your true north, whatever that might be. The multitude of micro-calibrations made to that compass don't happen passively. It's not as if the moral fiber of a person's being is poured into them through a series of Sunday school lessons. No, that calibration process is an active one, something that we engage in every day, even when we might not recognize it. The way we respond to every small test of our true north further solidifies the direction where it points. And there's no real true north for our moral compass that we can put into words or distill into one thing. We can't cop out by saying true north. For us, it's something simple like doing what the Bible says or following the law or something like that. No, true north is more mysterious and complex than that. A moral compass, much like an actual compass, doesn't tell us where the North Pole is actually located. It just points in that direction and leaves it to us to make our way there. In my book, Bravo Company, I say that perhaps there's a good life we're supposed to move toward, like flowing water finding its way to where it ought to be. Anyhow, while water does find its way to where it's going, it has an active role in the proceedings, carving and churning and pushing rivulets this way and that in unexpected ways. Like a good Calvinist, water may be predestined, but that doesn't allow it to abnegate its free will. Complex stuff, water, just like Calvinists. So I had to switch to a discussion of water there because I want to throw as many metaphors at you as I possibly can in hopes of either getting my point across in a brilliant fashion or confusing the shit out of you. Either way, I promise you're going to leave here stupefied. So let's get back to the moral compass. Your moral compass is something you have to be prepared to take a look at any time. Thus, we need to make sure that it's ready at all times. So, I ask you, What are you waiting for? Now, I better back up a little bit. Since this is a chapel talk, and I was a religion major, I realized I should have started off by talking about Advent. In case you didn't know, we're in the midst of that season. And Advent is a season that seems like it's all about waiting. Adventus in Latin means coming or arrival. And this season seems to be all about Christians anticipating the coming of Jesus' birth, which is celebrated on the 25th. What's the season mean, though? What does it mean to wait? Yes, sure, we wait for presents and Christmas morning and all the fun and wonder of the holiday. But to think that Advent is all about some passive act of waiting is true folly. Let me put it another way. To say that the whole purpose of Advent, for Christians at least, is to point our religious compass toward the morning of December 25th and then wait for it to come is a bankrupt proposition of the very meaning of Advent. No, December 25th is the place Advent points us to, but it's up to us to make our way there. It's up to us to decide what the culmination of Advent really means. It's all the things that lead up to Christmas morning that make Christmas so great. All the preparation and decorations and trying to find just the right present for our family members. It's all the songs and candles and talking about the meaning of it all and understanding the meaning of it all that leads up to the day. That's what makes the day so great. That's what Advent is about. It reminds me a lot of Monon Bell. If I stop to think about it, it does. How is that? Well, I was trying to figure out how to relate all this back to Wabash, and here's as fine a place as any to start. So what is it about the Monon Bell game that makes it the Monon Bell game? The football game is what everything points to, right? But it's all the stuff that leads up to it that makes it so great. All the tradition and all the events and all the hype. That's what makes the game so special. That's what makes us understand its worth. Now, let's be honest. What would really make it special is if you could say that you'd stolen the bell from DePaul. But how many of us can actually say that? But I digress. The same thing goes for graduating from Wabash College. You've chosen the path of a liberal arts education, much to the woe of your parents and to your siblings who chose to be engineers or something useful. What's the point of this education? I mean, yes, the end state, the true north, the December 25th is graduating with a degree, right? But it's not as if getting that diploma is what it's all about. No, by choosing to come to Wabash College, you've chosen 4 years of compass calibration. And here's where things get important. And here's where I stop asking you, what are you waiting for, and tell you to get down to it because there's no time to lose. Remember when I told you that soldiers who go to combat and do things, or just see things, that they know deep down just aren't right, and then they come home with a broken moral compass? Well, that happens outside of combat zones. And it's probably happened to each and every one of you at some point in your lives. No, it's definitely happened to you. I know it happened to me when I was sitting right there where you are. Sometimes I recognized it, and sometimes I didn't. Man, I do mean things, dumb things in college. Things that I hope my professors who are still around have either forgotten about or have the good discretion to never talk about. But some of those things knocked my true north out of whack in ways that it took years to fix. Thank goodness for all that dumb stuff that I did and had test my mettle, that I had countervailing influences working in the opposite direction, pointing to that true north for me. Professor Bill Plaker, for example, was more accurate than a GPS when it came to knowing north. And there are times that I think I ended up coming to Wabash, like flowing water, finding where it ought to be, just so I could sit in his classes. And I can see in retrospect the things that I did that veered from true north because Wabash helped orient me to true north. You're not here to graduate from Wabash College. You're here to go to Wabash College. It's an active, present tense affair. And every day you're tasked with testing that moral compass and finding a better true north, your true north. And it's getting tested in small ways in college. For the most part, ways that aren't life-changing or life-threatening. It's those small tests that set that true north. Those tests, those calibrations that you're going through every single day, they're consequential. Think about the decisions you make on a daily basis. And what do those mean for you? Now, in no way take this as moralizing, speechifying, or telling you how to live your life, okay? I'm not telling you how you should go about doing your business, but I am telling you that you should go about doing your business, and you should know how to do that. And that means keeping yourself oriented. Honors won by each loyal son, and highest rank shall instate her. Now, when I was here, I had to go have a couple conversations with Dean Thomas Bambry. And in those conversations, he never explicitly told me how I should go about my business, but he used his raised eyebrows to masterful effect to let me know that I should take a look at my business. And I did, and I thank him to this day. Professor David Blix gave me a strong nudge one semester when I went to pick up a final paper, a paper that was less than stellar. I turned to the back page and I saw this note written in pencil. Not a research paper. Wrong. F. I mean, how could I argue with a man who looked in my very soul and found it wanting? And to be fair, an F was generous. Those tests won't always come from comfortable places. And there's no way to always stay on a straight path. Remember the water metaphor? But to keep it all flowing to where it ought to be is the important part. To not lose the knowledge of where true north is at, that's the important thing. Because your compass will be tested one day when it's not about hijinks or a shoddy term paper. And we need to make sure we've done all we can to have a reliable and dependable way to know which way we should go, and they have the confidence to do it, no matter what's happening around us. Once again, I remind you, it's the season of Advent, and there's no time to wait. There's a Greek word for the coming of Christ. It's parousia. Now, my old mentor, Peter Gomes, used to say that the parousia is best defined as something happening when it happens. It doesn't happen on time or at any given time, it just happens. He used to say it's like, the parousia is like asking when the king or queen of England, what time they're supposed to show up. Well, there's no time they're supposed to show up. They just show up. And when they show up, they're on time because it's the frickin' queen, right? So, while Advent points to the 25th of December, it also points to a time unknown. The parousia, or the second coming of Christ, if you're into that stuff, could happen at any time. It's going to happen when it happens, and we have to be ready for it. And we all have our own parousia that's going to happen, and we have to be ready for it. Because we won't know how or whether or when it will come, but it's going to come. Well, I'm glad to be back at Wabash and to see that it's changed so much, and yet it hasn't. And I always think about what T.S. Eliot said in Four Quartets when I come back to Wabash for these homecomings, which is, we shall not cease from exploration. At the end of our exploring, we will arrive to where we started, and know the place for the first time. Thank you very much, Wabash.